Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. You're listening to Sunday Talks with Kellie and Lisa. We've had a bit of an interesting time getting on air this morning, but we are here. Good morning, Lisa.
Good morning, Kellie. Thank you so much for getting it fixed for us to be on the show this morning. Technology, man, I tell you.
We literally got on the air with 10 seconds to spare. It was exciting,
it was
folks.
Meant to
it was
be.
exciting.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness.
I know, right? Our plan this morning was to kind of revisit a little bit of what we talked about last week and move on from there. One of the things that I would kind of like to touch on, and we kind of did and we kind of didn't last time, was the Jewish holiday of Yom Kippur was just passed, and that is an atonement, or as many people like to call it, the at-one-ment. And part of learning to love yourself and have self-confidence is realizing that we are all truly connected and we are all at one with everything else. So I thought we would start the conversation this morning with that. What do you think?
I think that's a great conversation, because a lot of the basis of self-love is self-acceptance. And when you can tap into connecting to your connection, being source, universe, God, whatever the label it is for you, when you can tap into that and understand that you are a part of everything and you are perfectly and wonderfully made. However, we all have room for improvement, but, that really is important to the self-acceptance, self-awareness, and always going for growth. But I think that's a great way to start.
Right. And, one of the things, conversation that was taking place on social media this past week as well, was about we tend as human beings, when we are on our path and we are doing our shadow work and we are trying to be healing of ourselves first, and that's what it has to happen. You have to heal yourself first. But when we start doing that, all of a sudden we kind of think that, we know better what everybody else should be doing in their lives. And that's kind of a natural thing that happens when people start growing, the self-growth and the doing the shadow work. And the more we start kind of moving forward from all of our trauma within ourselves, we do kind of think, well, hey, I've done this work and that makes me qualified to help you do yours. And that's not the way it works at all. And if we're not really careful, we can become judgmental in spite of ourselves. It's not about everyone on the same path together being all one. It is we are all connected, and we are each and every one of us one with everything, while at the same time we are doing our own thing. We are all on our own paths. And what is right for me on my path might not be right for anyone else. So I think when we're talking about doing our own work and growing personally, we need to be mindful that it's really easy to say, I've struggled and I've gone through the dark night of the soul and I've conquered my demons, or at least I've become friends with them. And now that makes me further along my path than everyone else. And that's not true at all. The thing on social media, it was actually on Twitter, really brought that point home to me, that even the most quote-unquote enlightened among us still can slip up very easily and make it a point to say within themselves, well, I've done this work. So that puts me in a position where I'm over you, or I'm doing better than you are, or I'm farther along than you are. And none of that is true, because none of us truly know what is going on inside anyone else. The majority of us barely know what's going on inside ourselves, much less anyone else. So have you experienced that at all? Have you found that to be true, or do you have an entirely different perspective?
I've even been there myself. This is working, and you're excited, and, something is finally putting the pieces together, and you want others to have the same benefit. You want them to be able to be better than, not be better, that sounds terrible, but, to have
right.
that growth, to heal, to be a part, to fix their journey. And it's not our place to fix, but, you get
right.
excited, or somebody else gets excited, and sometimes it's the shiny object syndrome. For me, it's the shiny object syndrome a lot, but I find that there's this thing that works, and I want others to experience it, and I want to improve their life, but it's not my life. So how do I know that they aren't at their max peak of happiness, even if they're miserable? That's something that, I think a lot of people in the healing world don't take out of, they don't use that perspective, and it's my way
right.
is the right way. And I've seen that a lot. I also see a lot of not talking about the shadows, and it's all sunshine and rainbows and unicorns, and and I know we've talked about this before. There is part of the human experience that no matter what spin you put on it, it's still not necessarily the happiest of experiences. And we're going
right.
to experience grief. We're going to experience loss. We're going to experience the crappy part of being human, the hard part of being human. And, it's not always sunshine and rainbows and just good, happy feelings. Sometimes there's these other feelings too. And I see a lot of avoidance of that in the coaching world. And
yes.
It's a very dangerous, slippery slope. I feel like that I want to bring more balance, because, there's a day where you're going to be triggered by something. Granted, the whole
right.
goal is to not stay triggered as long, to be able to move past that experience back into a happier realm. However, you're still going to experience some of those things. And if you're not, to me, now here's that interjection that we were just talking about. To me, if you're completely avoiding the fact that there's these things going on around you, and you're not, handling the sad or the hurt or the grief, and everything is sunshine and rainbows, you're on the verge of collapse of some form or another, whether it's backsliding from your enlightenment quest or whatever you want to call it. In my opinion, and it is humble, you have to face those other experiences as well. And I feel like there's a dangerous, slippery slope out there in the coaching world that doesn't. There's some that help with shadow work, dealing with the trauma.
Right.
But a lot of what I see, especially maybe not on the surface, maybe I haven't dug into them deep enough, but on the surface I see that it's positive mindset.
Right.
But there's still
right.
some other side of that, and I think it can be dangerous. Did I answer your question?
Yes, and it's interesting you put it that way, because one of the ideas that I've had lately quite often is somebody should write a book called When Positive Mindset Doesn't Work. And it's because often that's where people fall. That's where they start off on a spiritual journey, and they are convinced they want to be the best that they can personally be, which is a phrase I hate because it's overused. But they're trying to advance themselves, and all of a sudden, where they've bought into the positive thinking, and then they have a ring, like maybe string along several days in a row that are anything but positive. And then instead of looking at what is happening and how they are triggered, they start, well, I have to be positive, so I'm just not going to think about it. And what ends up happening is what? Well, we shove all that stuff down, and then it blows up later, and we say, oh, well, that positive thinking stuff, that's bunk. That doesn't work.
Yep.
And that's what happens. So I think we need to be realistic. As healers, as teachers, we need to be realistic and understand that you can be generally a positive person and still have a bad day, and that's all right. That's okay. You know, with some of the things that I've gone through trying to keep my house and my property maintained in the last year by myself, there are days when I go outside and I look and I go, well, that needs to be done. Well, that needs to be done. Well, I can't do that by myself. Well, who's going to do that? Well, I can't do that. And I talk myself into a bad situation. And then I will usually catch myself and I'll go, you know what? I can't do that right now, but eventually it'll get done. It's okay. Oh, look how pretty those weeds are, so tall. You know, I have resorted to that to find something beautiful in my chaos. And I think oftentimes, you know, it might not be a property that's overgrown and with things that need to be fixed that, you know, I can't do it. Your situation might be entirely different, you know, but still we all have chaos that happens in our lives. And if you, like me, I'm used to being able to do everything by myself. Well, you know, I'm battling several autoimmune issues right now, and I can't do everything by myself. So instead of me wallowing in it, which would be oh so easy to do, I try to find the beauty in my chaos. And I think if each one of us can try to do that, and, you know, sometimes it's hard. You know, I'm going to be real. Sometimes it's hard. But if you really look at it, you know, and right now here where I live, you know, leaves are starting to change. And, you know, all these big tall weeds that were, you know, beautiful and deep green with flowers, you know, a couple of weeks ago are now starting to be, you know, yellowy, brownish, orangish. And I have gotten myself to the point where I can now look at the stuff that really should not even exist right now. It should have all been mowed down. And I could go, oh, look at those beautiful colors. See, in past years, when all of that was mowed down, I was not able to appreciate how these particular weeds look as the seasons change. And I said that to a neighbor, and she laughed at me, and she said, boy, you're really grasping it. Well, weeds. Yeah, some days we do that. You know, some days every single person on this planet has to get to a point where you are looking for something that is beautiful in your chaos. Yeah. And, you know, I think when I started my spiritual journey, I followed a couple of people that were all about don't have a bad day. You can't afford to have a bad day. You have to be positive. And what it ended up doing is giving me pretty much a complete breakdown at the ripe old age of 28. And since that point, I've realized it's not that their entire message was bad or wrong for me. It's just that you can't will away everything. And, you know, I think that's where we get caught up. So really, I would like to write that book, you know, positive attitude doesn't count, or, you know, when positive thinking doesn't work, or some other title like that, because I think a lot of people need that right now. You know,
I think I had an old ISBN for that. So somebody else doesn't take it when positive thinking goes wrong or something like that. Like, something like that. Yeah. It just, I'm glad
I had someone
on that though.
Well, yeah, and I think it's important because, you know, I've had a old coaching client call me the other day, and she recently lost her mother. And she called me crying, and she said, you know, you can't will away or wish away a death in the family. I can't find the beauty here. And it really shook me to my core because that's so true. It doesn't matter if you've lost someone, if someone has transitioned to the other side, or if it's been a divorce, or if it was a loss of a job can even trigger things in people. It doesn't matter what your loss is. It's important that you feel those emotions when they come up, and then when they subside, then you can look for your beauty. But we can't wish away bad days. We're always going to have them.
And, I'm glad that you expanded on that, because positive thinking is so important, and looking for the beauty in situations is very important. When it's a problem is when you're just continuing to allow situations to be bad situations, because you're pulling out the beautiful parts of them. And sometimes it's not a good situation to be in. For example, a domestic violence situation.
Right.
I do not condone staying. I don't condone looking for the beauty to stay. In cases where it's a job situation, you can look at the different aspects of what is the part that's making me miserable? Why am I so miserable? Can I pull some beautiful things out of this? And then in turn, change my attitude towards my job. And maybe it's not really as bad as I think. Maybe there's some other things I need to take care of. With grief, you have to go through that cycle. You have to go through the process.
Yep.
And it's okay if you can't pull the beautiful parts out of it. One thing that you nailed it completely, the coaching aspect in some situations, and some coaches, they don't talk about the work that it takes to get there, to be able to always pull the beautiful out of situations. And there's that dangerous slope, in my opinion, and that is one reason why. Okay, here's the truth about Lisa. When you and I ended our show, I continued my journey for a very long time. For not a very long time. It hasn't been that long since we ended the show. But, I did continue my journey, and I moved to Dallas in 2019. But I stopped. Somewhere along the way, I stopped my journey, and I'm now coming back to it because I was seeing this in the spiritual world. I was like, why in the world can I not always be positive? And, I have to fix these things that are causing this trauma, and when I get triggered, I need to address it. And I was done. I was completely done with trying to better myself in that part of life, right? So I couldn't find what I was looking for. There was something out there that I was missing, and a piece was just not being, it wasn't being advertised. There was always all sorts of spiritual coaches or, positive mindset for the most part, advertisements on Facebook and social media, and I would click on it, and it was like there was something still missing. There was a connection of where I was at that point. The advertisement that I saw from that personal coach, I didn't need that at that point because I wasn't at their level yet. So I was in search of somebody who I could connect. That was, we knew about positive mindset. We knew about finding the beautiful, but gosh darn it, I just wanted to be mad and miserable for a moment.
Right.
I just wanted to be mad and miserable for a moment. And I didn't want anybody to tell me about changing my mindset.
Right.
I walked away from my family, my friends, the house that I owned with my fiance. I walked away from an 8-year relationship. I walked away from a lot of comfort zone and security to move to Dallas. And while it was a very exciting time for me, it was so surreal. It was the most bizarre thing that I have ever experienced in my life, and there was still some really shitty parts to that. And
right.
It hurt. And it was when I got here and the excitement wore off, I was like, oh, wait a minute. What did I just do? Was this the right decision for me? I miss what I had. And it was really, really hard for me to focus on look at what you just did. This was amazing. You did this on your own. And it was really hard for me to own the good parts because the bad parts were sitting there like, hi, we're still here.
Right.
You didn't face us. You know? So it was like, what do I do about this? How do I do this? And what I was finding was not what I was needing to heal me at that time. So I walked away from it. And now I'm back.
I think that's a really common story, though. Well, not like your story, but walking away from it. And then I think we need time to process. I think we get to a certain level in our spiritual journey, and then we kind of have to stop to keep from being overwhelmed. I think we need time for our subconscious to process what we've learned. And when you go through something particularly traumatic, like you did, I mean, like you said, you left everything that you knew to start over in a different town. That, you know, kind of brings people, and I know I threw everything that I had in a Chevy Chevette one time and drove cross country to start over. So I understand, you know, it's hard and it's scary, but you have to look at the fact that right or wrong, you made a decision that felt right when you made it, and you stuck through it, the whole process. And now looking back, you're in a much brighter place where now you are secure enough in yourself and who you are and what you're capable of that you can move forward again. But I think you needed that time. And I think, you know, periodically we all need to take some time away just to kind of sit and process and be. It's sort of like our inner balance kind of gets whacked off, you know, and you just really need it to get back on track. You need to rebalance yourself. When you throw yourself for a loop, which is basically what anybody does when they, you know, abandon all hope and throw caution to the wind and do this great big huge thing, you need some time to rebalance. And, okay, who am I now after this whole thing? You know, and another thing that I wanted to bring up, it appeared in my head when you were talking, is we have to also be mindful that while we are on our own spiritual journey and we're making changes that are good for us and we're growing, those other people around us are doing the same thing, whether they realize they're doing it or not. You know, one of the things that my ex would always say is when he got his big promotion, which ultimately was the end of our marriage, we just didn't realize it for 7 years, his big thing was, you've got to be the best you can be. I'm being my best self. And what he didn't realize is his best self, what he was calling his best self, didn't gel with my best self.
Right.
And where we were very, very, very close for a very, very, very long time, all of a sudden he went down this tangent of, you know, corporate America and, you know, rah, the company. And I was on the exact opposite end of the spectrum going, what happened to that creative musician I married? You know, because he became someone else. And unfortunately, the person he became turned his back on spirituality and dealing with your shadow self and became one of those be your best, don't have a bad day, it's all about positive thinking people. And what that means is a lot of his trauma was never resolved. He's never chosen to look at it, and he's just moving on, looking at the exterior to make himself happy. And anytime and I'm not just picking on him, anytime we get in a position where we need someone else or a job or a whatever it is to make ourselves happy, you're not really happy. You know, happiness comes from inside. And one of the things that I know, because I've known you for a long time, you are a much lighter, much happier person now than you were before you turned your life upside down and inside out and made those huge changes. So I'm very proud of you for doing that. You know,
thank you.
But because
that's not what this show is about, guys. But
I know, but that's what we go through. You know, and when we're going through it, we kind of feel like, you know, I made a wrong choice. What am I doing? This is horrible. How am I going to do this? And then when we get through the other side, we forget to pat ourselves on the back. And really, that goes right back to self-love, like we were talking about last week. It's all about, you know, celebrate your victories, even if they're tiny. You know, I had a client years ago who would come to me for self-esteem, and she hated herself because she'd allowed herself to get very, very, very heavy to the point where her body was screaming at her. And her big victory one day, I will never forget it. She called me and said, I did not buy the candy bar. Okay. It wasn't registering, you know. But then she explained, you said, celebrate my little victories. My little victory was going to the store and not coming out with candy. Well, yahoo. That's a tiny little thing for most of us, but it was huge for her. And that's the whole point. When we're working on self-love and when we're working on dealing with our triggers and dealing with our shadow selves, and many of us in the last couple of years have gone through a dark night of the soul, we need to remember that those little tiny things are really big. They add up. So, you know, don't throw away your little tiny version, your little tiny victories. You know, in any of the 12-step programs, what do they tell you? One day at a time. And a lot of times when we're on a spiritual journey and we think we're doing good and we're feeling better, all of a sudden the rug gets pulled out from under us a whole huge percentage of the time. I would say it's above 90% of the time. We're going along and we think we've dealt with our shadow and we think we're doing really good in life, and then all of a sudden the rug gets pulled out from under us and we're back to square one. And we forget about all those tiny little victories that we had made before we fell back down. And sometimes all it takes when the rug is pulled out from under you is just thinking, you know what, I've been here before. And last time I was here, I did this. And sometimes in my own case, sometimes what I managed to accomplish was brushing my hair. And that's something, you know, most people do automatically every day. But I had gotten into such a dark spot myself that I just went days without brushing my hair. And I remember that morning where I got up out of bed and I didn't trip over the dog, which I had been doing every day for, you know, several weeks before that. And I went into the bathroom and I automatically just went for my brush and I brushed my hair and I went, whoa, I'm coming back. And such a very tiny, almost imperceptible change within me was something to celebrate. And I think when we're talking about self-love, it is absolutely paramount that we celebrate those tiny little things. So what do you think?
I agree. And, you know, one thing, taking inventory, you mentioned remembering all of the things that you have done and, you know, your successes and how you got there or whatnot. You can always keep a list. Write that down. And anytime you're just feeling defeated, pull out that list and read it and say, this is what I've done and this is how, you know, what I've accomplished. And continue to read that list until you're like, you know what? This is what I've done and this is what I've accomplished. Now let's go crush this, or whatever phrase you need to push yourself forward. But it does, that part of that thinking, it might take some time to change from where you are to where you want to be, but the steps in between, if you have consistency with your methods and if you're continually working toward it, That's the key. Those are those little successes, and you can write those down. And there are books now, Kelly, where you can congratulate yourself in your daily planner and put stickers like, I didn't kill somebody today. Good for you. That means that you're getting a handle on your anger, or just the little things. Like you said, sometimes it's something like brushing your hair, and that can be huge. I don't like to look at small things versus big things. I know that they exist. Graduating from college, there's a lot of steps on the way. But why do we in this particular society say graduating from college is more of an achievement than somebody who brushed their hair? I still have a lot of my own baggage that comes along with those types of comparisons and phrases. For example, I'm in the corporate world, and while I love what I do, I just don't know that I want to be a CEO or VP of anything. Like, I don't know that I'm that. There's that comparison. I don't know that I'm that driven. I don't know that I'm driven in that way to be, a 60, 70, 80-hour a week corporate salary person. I just don't know that that's what I want for myself anymore. My former self did. My former self wanted to be the president of a college or a university, but I'm not even in the academic world anymore, which I miss, sidebar, by the way. But, I don't know that I love what I do, and yes, I want more, and yes, I want to have more successes on my little checked off column, but I don't know that that's the way that I want to go. So trying to find that balance for me right now is working on it. But, who's to say? Like, how did that become a thing where people are shamed or not taken as seriously or aren't given the same kudos because a certain part of society thinks that that's small peanuts?
Right.
And that's another thing that I see a lot.
It is. And it's everyone is on a different path. Even if it's not a spiritual journey, everyone is on a different life path. And I think part of the issues that I've seen when I was doing a lot of coaching is that people tend to want to put people in boxes. And I know in schools, teachers are teaching to a test now. Well, you're teaching to a standardized test, but maybe not all your kids in your class are standardized kids, But I think that's a lot of what I see from previous coaching clients that, they were geared for, you go to college, you get a degree, you get a good job, you climb the corporate ladder, you move up to vice president or president of a company. And it completely neglects that huge portion of each and every one of us that is spiritual in nature. And if you're only feeding your materialistic desires, sooner or later, that's going to come back to bite you when you realize you may have all the money that you ever dreamt of, and you may have the prestige and the title, that you wanted, but you're still not happy. Some of the most miserable people I have ever spent time with in my life have been those people. They have all the money, they have the big job, they have, from outward appearances, they should be amazingly happy, and yet they're miserable. So it's good that you didn't push yourself down a path that you realized in your heart and soul maybe wasn't the right path anymore. I know when I was in my 20s, I had already been a CEO of a corporation that I started from the ground up. And I thought that was the key to happiness. And when I got there and I got the money coming in and I had the big office and everything, I realized, number one, my daughter was suffering because I had no time to spend with her. And number two, my first husband was still beating the crap out of me every night. So my search for this is what I need to be happy really didn't change a thing except for the worst. So I ended up that story I teased about earlier, putting all my belongings into a Chevy Chevette and driving cross country in the middle of the night just to get away from him. So when I started over, I went down an entirely different path. It's not, you have to realize, and each and every one of us needs to realize, what is it that really feeds your heart and soul? What is it you really need to be happy? Because if we're doing what our society says in the United States, you can accumulate a lot of toys and not feel like playing with any of them. And I see that over and over and over. So I think a huge part of going back to the self-love topic of self-love is realizing, it's okay to not want the mega mansion, the big job, and all the fancy cars. It's okay to not want that. And I think in this country, a lot of people make that very not okay. You're supposed to want more and more and more and more. And that's not really what people need most of the time. Now, I guess there are people that really does feed their soul. It didn't mine.
Right. Well, how do we take what we are being bombarded with now more so than ever, with the instant access to everything on the planet and the one-click shopping and the instant videos that, we can sit there and just scroll YouTube and Facebook on our phones, for Pete's sake,
right?
And just see all of these things that make us not good enough or feel not enough. Let me rephrase that because that was incorrect speaking. That make us feel like we're not good enough, or we haven't accomplished enough, or we're not complete, or we're not whole. For me, I would still love to be the president of a university, not, different type of capitalistic. For a university, I love education. I don't need to try to go down that path. This lifetime is okay to not have that little, check mark off of my on my check mark column. I'm okay with that. But, I'm not skinny enough. I'm not wealthy enough. I'm not put together enough. I'm not living in the, great big house. It's in our faces all of the time. And there's this small movement happening where we are saying no more. However, it's still there, and it's still, in our faces. And part of self-love, part of that journey is accepting who you are. And then, Kellie, there's also if I accept who I am, do I really need to do anything to move forward and be the best version of myself? I mean, it's like, right. I don't want to just stay stagnant. I don't want to stay where I am, but how, it's that perfect, it's that masterpiece and a hot mess all at the same time. That gray area is so hard for people to navigate, for myself included. I'm like, I have a great life. I love my apartment. I love where I live. My job is nice. My family, all of these things are great. However, there's the other side where I should start exercising more. I need to be healthier. I need to be the best version of myself. I want more money. I want I want what I have apartment-wise. I want to own that instead, and I want a newer car, and, I want to be able to treat my family more than I can now, and I don't want my family to have to worry about financial things either. I should be able to just dole out, hundreds of thousands of dollars to help their life be easier. And so I'm in that gray area of my life is great, but then there's more. But wait, there's more. What do you?
I know
that navigating that gray area is so overwhelming at times.
Well, one of the misconceptions about people on a spiritual path is that, they give away all of their worldly goods and they sit on a rock somewhere and meditate. And we live in a materialistic society. There is nothing wrong with money. There's nothing wrong with wanting money. There's absolutely nothing wrong with wanting to treat your family to things. The problem comes in when we make having money the end-all, be-all thing we must have to be happy, because that's not what it does. Money is just a tool, and we'll go into money more starting next week. But just to throw it out there, since we're on this topic now, I think we need to let go of what society says about having money. Money is only a tool. Money is not good. Money is not bad. And I have said before, if I ever get enough money, I am going to create a fresh food bank where people can come once a week and pick up fresh produce, because I see that as a need. And that is a need that requires money to fill it. So my end-all, be-all is actually fresh food bank, not the money. The money is a tool that I can use to make that happen. And I think what you're talking about, making sure that your family has an easier life, money is a tool to make that happen. It's not like you want money for money's sake. There are a lot of people who play a game with themselves where they have to make more money this month than last month, and it's all about the money. And that is a misplaced priority. It isn't about having money. It's what that money can do. That's why so many people were so upset when someone spent, millions of dollars building themselves a rocket ship and going into space, when that same money could have literally ended hunger. It's not about the money. It's about what you do with it. And I think when we start looking at money in that way, it becomes less about the money. Now, if some huge farmer contacted me this afternoon and said, I will provide fresh fruits and vegetables for your I can't talk, sorry, for your food bank that you're planning, then the money wouldn't be so important, because I would have had that need filled in another way.
Right.
So I think that's the key. We beat ourselves up for wanting money, and we should stop that immediately, because that's a big key in not ever having it. Is because we associate that having money is bad. Money is not bad. Money is not good. Money is simply a tool. But from a self-love perspective, yesterday I took a friend whose car is broken to the grocery store. And in exchange for that, she bought groceries for me. I wasn't really wanting to go grocery shopping, but I took her. And when I got home with these groceries that I really didn't quite want to go buy, I looked at it and went, you know what? This is a bounty. I need to accept this gratefully, and I need to realize that this is something that there was an energy exchange. She didn't have cash to put gas in my car, but she was able to use her card to buy groceries that I very much appreciate, even though I wasn't quite ready for them. And we need to stop ourselves when we start going down the road of, well, gas money would have been great. Yeah, it would have been great, but you know what? Groceries are better. And there is still an energy exchange there. It was my expectation of gas money that made me have to catch myself. Ordinarily, I would have taken her to the store and not expected anything. But it was the promise of, I'll, pay you for your time and gas that tripped me up. And we need to be careful with that too, because anything we are given, look at it as money. Okay, look at that as $20 worth of produce that I don't have to buy now. Instead, we seem to think that money is the only thing that will fix our needs. Now, if some wealthy person who wanted to remain anonymous but wanted to give your relatives a new house, a new car, and pay their bills for 5 years, would you still need the money? You know, you might say, pay mine too. You know. But the point is, we don't look at compensation as what it really is. We equate it to money, and it's not always money.
And next week's topic will be a continuation of this story. Well, we're planning on like a 3-show or 4-show series just around the idea of money, scarcity, lack, abundance. I love what you said, with it's a bounty, and it gives you the opportunity to put your money somewhere else now because you do have those groceries. So that mindset. Right. But the part of you accepting that and changing that mindset is, the idea of acceptance. And it doesn't just stem to, or doesn't stem, that's not the phrasing I wanted to use. It isn't just about accepting of self, it's accepting of outside things as well. And you hit it when you said expectations. And I know we talked about this last week. We talked about expectations. And it really is, it doesn't necessarily boil down to that's the thing is expectations, but part of accepting and allowing is the expectation aspect. And I don't know the answer. I don't have the little, I don't have the red button like Staples used to have where it fixes everything. I don't. I just know that there are all these different tools that I can put together to help me on my journey. And tomorrow I might add another one. I might get rid of 5. I'm still trying to figure out what's working for me. But I do know that love of self, if you can't love self, you really can't love others either. And I would challenge anyone to debate that with me. I don't know that anybody would, but, it's, to me, it's false, and it's not real. Well, I don't know. Let me just stop before I get myself in trouble. Acceptance of self is so important.
It is. It is. And I know the road you were going down, and I propose we talk about love and what is love and relationships after we wrap our money series. So there you go, folks. That's our next 6 weeks. But self-love is so important. It is critical in truly unconditionally loving someone else, and that is way, way, way too big a topic for the last 10 minutes of this show. But it kind of does go together. I will say that loving yourself does go right along with accumulating money or wealth or whatever, however you want to express that. The main thing that I want people to take away from the last 2 weeks is to pay attention to how you treat yourself. If you're one of the people who is always, should have done that better. Oh, I said that wrong. Be kind to yourself. When we talk about being kind to oneself, that's what we are talking about. Do not constantly berate yourself. And I know there are people listening to the show right now who do that constantly. So please, please, please be mindful of your self-talk. It isn't always about how other people treat you that makes us feel bad. Yeah, someone can hurt your feelings by something they say, but you don't have to internalize that. I know someone whose pat response, and she says it so easily and so automatically, it amazes me every time. Someone will say something about what she's wearing or how her hair looks or something, and she'll go, well, thank you very much for your opinion. I do appreciate you taking the time. And that's it. She's let it go. She's walked on down the block, and she's done. And she doesn't internalize anything anymore. And I've watched her for decades. I've known her for a very long time. And I've seen the self-growth that she has done. And it is astonishing. It is just so beautiful to watch. But I love what she says, and she says it so easily, and like she doesn't even think about it. It's automatic. And we can say that to ourselves, too. I put on something the other day and went, whoa, that's really baggy now. I've lost a lot of weight. And the way I said it to myself, it was like, ew, that was not a compliment. So I had to say, you know what? I'm sorry I said that to myself. I clearly am going to have to buy new clothes. And that's a totally different perspective than berating yourself for something not looking good anymore. But we all do that to ourselves all the time. So be kind to yourself. Be mindful of what you say to yourself and how you treat yourself. There's countless examples that we can both throw out on how we each have beat ourselves up through the years. So don't do that. So we are winding down on the show already. This has been a great talk. I think we've hit on a lot of things that will really help some people. What do you think? What would you like to leave people with?
Stop giving yourself backhanded compliments. We don't like it when people do it to us. We shouldn't do it to ourselves. Treat yourself the way that you treat others. Unless you're a jerk. Don't do that then. But seriously, if you're giving out all of the love and attention, it is not selfish to take time for yourself. It is not selfish. It is not vain. Let's drop the vanity. We all know people who are truly vain, and then we know people who are just balanced. You can have confidence without being narcissistic or cocky or vain. Just treat yourself better. And even if you're treating yourself amazingly, you still treat yourself better. There's always room for growth.
There is. And, it's understanding that everyone has a bad day. A bad day does not equal the end of the world. And I think sometimes we treat it like it does. So, So hopefully we've left you with lots to think about. And we've teased our upcoming segment about your relationship with money.
I'm so excited.
So, I am too. That it's going to be a really deep, quote-unquote, meaty series. And I hope you guys all enjoy it. I hope you've enjoyed the show. So have a wonderful week. And please like and share the show. We really appreciate it when you do that. Thanks so much for listening. We will see you next week. Bye.
Bye, everyone.